So there's an issue that I've been struggling with for, I think, maybe the last like 15 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. Basically, ever since I started my big fourth edition campaign. And to give a little bit of background, the campaign was a direct follow up to my previous third edition campaign, where a demon invasion kind of overran the entire setting that I had been developing up to that point. And I've been developing the setting, and it's basically like an Australia-sized continent that I've been working on since I was a small child. And I decided I wanted to do kind of a soft reset, and so this campaign was demons invade the world. The player characters need to rescue who they can, salvage what they can, and escape to a new continent. And they did that. And so when I followed up to the next campaign in fourth edition, I had to decide, like, well, what do these new societies look like? Because we were doing a bit of a time skip, maybe like I think like 150 years, something like that. And I needed to decide, like, what do these society, how do they develop from the people and the cultures that made it to this new continent? And one of the things that I was very cognizant of, even at the time, but I didn't have any better ways uh, uh, to express it. I kind of, I think I ran out of time in campaign prep, and so I just sort of went with, like, okay, there's a king, there's castles, there's knights, etc., etc. Like all the standard stuff you expect to see in D&D, they're all here. Like there's a king and his like right hand man, the who the party's going to be more interacting with, that kind of thing. There's a lost prince, and there's some very interesting storylines going on there. But what I was never really fully satisfied with, despite the fact that I did end up going with it canonically, is the existence of a king. So why would these survivors, these refugees from the old world, decide to choose one of themselves to become a king? Like, who would actually voluntarily choose that? I'm not saying no one would. I'm just saying, as a culture, it seems pretty unbelievable that a large group of people would all nominate one person to be like an absolute monarch. And that's how it was presented, is this absolute monarch. They have all the power, they have all the control. And yeah, there was like counselors and advisors and things like that, but ultimately it came down to the authority of one person, which has never really been a good idea for the entirety of human history, because kings suck, man. Kings really suck. They are an extremely antiquated way of governing a people. Now, do people need governing? Yeah, probably. I mean, like, realistically, yes. A culture can't really exist without a government of some sort. But the idea that it should be one person, that one person can be trusted to have all the power and not abuse it, is a frankly disturbingly naive idea. And I think you'll find that in a lot of history, a lot of kings and equivalents, your emperors, your shahs, your whatever it is, your whatever absolute monarch you end up arriving at, they tend not to get there all at once. They're usually like built up over time, and then once they're established, they never leave. In this setting that I was making, the society didn't really have time to undergo that process. I just sort of like jumped to the end because this is where I want it to be. That's bad world building on my part. Well, I was younger and naive. The issue is that I think a lot of people, like, especially like if you're going into novels or TV or movies, any kind of media where these kinds of tropes are playing out, where they're like, there is a king. Is he a good king? Is he a bad king? I would argue there are no good kings. Not in the sense of this like active absolute monarch. Is like the king slash queen, whatever, the monarch of Great Britain, is that a good construct? I mean, it's better, because they're not the same kind of thing that we think of when we think of a king or a queen of a, feudalistic medieval society, right? Any kind of like absolute monarch is a de facto dictator, right? They, even if like it's a stretch of the imagination, you can't really envision a realistic person being a good monarch, right? But let's say that they are. Let's say, it's someone who is pure of heart, and they want to do their best, and they care about their people, and they care about more than just maintaining their own power and their own legacy, and they want to do what's right. Even so, their very existence and the very system in which they operate is an inherent social injustice. And they won't dismantle it. They could. They're the only ones who could, barring like a revolution, basically. The only ones who could peacefully dismantle this system. And they choose not to. And I would argue that anyone who wants to be in that position, who says, I should be king, I should have all the power, I can be trusted, you can trust me, that person should never be in power, should be removed from all power that they have. Because seeking power is a sure sign of someone who is going to abuse power. Human nature has not changed since the dawn of time, and it's not about to change. And so why should we expect a king to be any better, right? This is largely to do with like world building factors. Like when you are creating fictional societies and you put in an absolute monarch, whether you call them a king or not, I'm just using king as the blanket statement. Anyone who has unquestionable plenary authority over whatever domain they're in is sort of automatic, as long as it is over other people. Like if you're absolute authority over your farm, like whatever, that's fine. Like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about absolute authority over the lives of other people, a lot of other people. You are automatically the bad guy, no matter what you are trying to do. Like you're never going to do it perfectly. Everything is your fault automatically, because you are not sharing responsibility, you are not sharing authority, you are not, like, it's automatically a bad situation, no matter how much you may genuinely be trying. And so I would encourage you, as world builders, as fiction writers, to think about these kinds of things when you are establishing your fictional settings. All kings are bad. All kings are bad. They are, and like, are there worse things? Yeah, there's worse ways to do things, right? There are worse ways to do things. I'm not saying it's the worst possible system, but I'm saying that it is never a good system. And it is an automatic source of tension and potential dramatic, what is it? Like dramatic narrative hooks to really think about the way that a absolute monarchy interacts with the lives of normal people. Because ostensibly, the normal people are the ones who matter. The vast majority of citizens in any kind of setting are normal people, your basic citizenry. And they are being trampled on. And maybe some of them don't even realize it. Maybe some of them are like, yes, I am in favor of this king. This is a good king. I support this king. Not realizing that just by having a king, they are being oppressed. They are the victims of a social injustice that they do not even realize. And I think there's a particular possibility for player characters who tend not to fit into that mold to be able to examine a system from the outside. Usually they they're arriving into a situation and they're able to examine it more objectively and realize the problems with any system that they are presented with. Whereas the people who are born and raised into that system might not realize. And so being able to have that step back as a player character, as an outsider, as an objective viewer, to see the problems in a system and be able to address them, that is a great way. And be able to, like, even if they aren't there to fix it, maybe they're there to do something entirely different. Maybe they're just there to try to live their lives. But to be able to point at the system and say, this is wrong. This is evil. This is inadequate. This is unequal and should not be tolerated. Just the ability to say that is the mark of the protagonist, the heroes. Because the background, the NPCs are not going to say that. They're just going to go along with life as usual. Like whatever the monarch wants to do, whatever the king says is law, that is automatically a travesty. Kings should not be tolerated. Kings, and I would argue that except in a few extreme examples, you're probably the good guy if you oppose the monarchy. The monarch, like, when has having an absolute extreme aristocracy ever helped society, right? When has that ever happened, literally ever in history? So I would say that if the player characters are really meant to be good guys, if they're really meant to be heroes, they are going to oppose any kind of absolute ruler at every point, because that's what heroes do.